Some fears once kept our ancestors alive. Some are learned in a single bad moment and never fully let go. And at least one of them isn't even officially recognized as a phobia at all, even though millions of people say they feel it. Every fear on this list runs on the same basic hardware, an ancient threat detection system that doesn't always know the difference between a real danger and a modern imitation of one. Some of these fears protected our ancestors from predators and falls. Others are almost entirely social, built around the fear of what other people might think. Let's break down 9 of them and what's actually happening in your brain each time. Arachnophobia, the fear of spiders, comes from the Greek word arachne. Psychologist Martin Seligman proposed something called prepared learning, the idea that humans are biologically primed to fear certain ancient threats, like spiders and snakes, faster and more easily than modern dangers like, say, electrical outlets, even though outlets are statistically far more dangerous today. It's consistently one of the most common specific phobias reported, and the strange part is that most of the spiders people panic over couldn't actually harm them at all. Treatment for it is also one of the better studied success stories in psychology. Structured, gradual exposure therapy has repeatedly been shown to significantly reduce the fear response, sometimes in just a handful of sessions. It's a useful reminder that even very old, deeply wired fears aren't necessarily permanent. The brain that learned to panic can also learn gradually that the threat isn't what it once was. Acrophobia, the fear of heights, comes from the Greek akron, meaning summit. Researchers studying infants found evidence that a wariness of heights may show up astonishingly early. The famous visual cliff experiments in the 1960s tested babies on a glass platform positioned over an apparent drop, and many infants refused to crawl across it, even though the surface was completely solid. That suggests at least part of this fear isn't purely learned through a bad experience. Some of it may be built in from the start. Interestingly, later research found that the reaction has less to do with the visual sense of a drop and more to do with a mismatch between what your eyes see and what your inner ear reports about balance, which is part of why heights can feel destabilizing even when you're standing on something completely solid. Claustrophobia, the fear of enclosed spaces, comes from the Latin claustrum, meaning a closed off place. Here's the twist most people miss: it's rarely really about the size of the space itself, it's about the feeling of being trapped with no way out and no way to call for help. That's why some people are completely fine in a small closet they can open anytime, but panic the instant an elevator door closes and they lose control of the exit. It's also why claustrophobia frequently overlaps with panic disorder. The sensation of restricted breathing that comes with the tight space can trigger the exact same physical alarm as a full blown panic attack, even when there's plenty of actual air in the room. Many people with claustrophobia describe a very specific detail. It's rarely the space closing in that bothers them most. It's not knowing exactly when they'll be let back out. Glossophobia, the fear of public speaking, comes from the Greek glossa, meaning tongue. Surveys have repeatedly found public speaking ranked among people's single most common fears, in some studies ranked even higher than the fear of death itself. From an evolutionary lens, that actually makes a strange kind of sense. Standing in front of a group and risking public judgment once could mean real social rejection, and for most of human history, being rejected by the group wasn't just embarrassing, it could be genuinely dangerous to your survival. Modern research on the fear has also found something encouraging. The physical sensations it produces, the racing heart, the shaky hands, are nearly identical to the sensations of excitement. And some psychologists suggest that simply relabeling the feeling as excited rather than afraid can meaningfully change how it's experienced in the moment. Nyctophobia, the fear of the dark, comes from the Greek nyx, meaning night. It's one of the most common fears reported in early childhood, and while it usually fades with age, it doesn't disappear for everyone. The logic underneath it is simple. Darkness strips away your ability to see a threat coming, so your brain compensates by treating the unknown as dangerous by default, whether or not anything is actually there. For most children, the fear fades naturally as they build up enough real world experience to trust that the dark, on its own, isn't actually the danger, it's simply the absence of information. Agoraphobia, the fear of open or public spaces, comes from the Greek agora, meaning marketplace. Despite the name, it's often not really about open spaces at all. It's about the fear of being somewhere you can't easily escape or get help if something goes wrong. In its most severe form, agoraphobia can make even leaving the house feel overwhelming, which is part of why it's frequently treated alongside panic disorder rather than as a fear of physical space by itself. It often develops after someone experiences an unexpected panic attack in a public setting. And the fear that follows isn't really of the plaza or the store, it's the fear of having another attack somewhere they can't quickly get to safety. Thanatophobia, the fear of death, comes from the Greek thanatos. Some psychologists, building on philosopher Ernest Becker's influential 1973 book, The Denial of Death, argue that the awareness of our own mortality quietly shapes an enormous amount of human behavior and culture. From the pursuit of legacy and achievement, to religion, to simply staying busy enough to avoid thinking about it too directly. Unlike most fears on this list, Thanatophobia isn't really about avoiding one specific trigger. It's about carrying the awareness of an ending that can't ultimately be avoided at all. Psychologists Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Pischinsky built directly on Becker's ideas in the 1980s to form what's now called terror management theory, and their research has found that subtle reminders of mortality can measurably shift people's behavior, sometimes making them cling more tightly to their beliefs, their culture, or their sense of purpose, almost as a buffer against the fear underneath. Social phobia, the fear of judgment, isn't about crowds themselves. It's about the fear of being evaluated, embarrassed, or rejected by other people. Researchers have found that most socially anxious people dramatically overestimate how much others are actually paying attention to them, a phenomenon sometimes called the spotlight effect. In reality, most people are far too focused on their own worries to be scrutinizing anyone else nearly as closely as it feels like they are. That gap between perceived and actual attention is now one of the most well documented findings in social anxiety research, and simply knowing it exists has become part of many modern treatment approaches. And finally, trypophobia, the fear of clustered holes, like the ones in a honeycomb or a lotus seed pod. Unlike the other fears on this list, trypophobia doesn't come from ancient Greek at all. It was coined by an anonymous poster on an internet forum in 2005, and it wasn't formally studied by scientists until 2013, when researchers Jeff Cole and Arnold Wilkins found that trypophobic images share visual properties with the markings of venomous animals and the appearance of skin disease, suggesting the aversion might be an old disease avoidance instinct accidentally triggered by an unrelated pattern. It's still not officially recognized as a clinical phobia, and scientists are still debating exactly why it happens at all. Some researchers now argue it's less a true fear response and more a form of disgust, since many people describe the sensation as nausea and revulsion rather than actual dread.